Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Science, Facts, and Fallacies, episode 214. Kevin, it's so good to see you again. Last week was crazy, and I was here all by myself. I was a little lonely. How are you?
I'm doing okay, but it's been a real grind for me. We've been doing a lot of things between work and doing my wife's job. It's killing me, and we planned I wouldn't want to say a baby shower this weekend. We know that the baby will be here sometime between now and May 16th. On May 16th at 8 p.m. They give her the drugs to make her have it. And so we planned this a long time ago, have a little get together, first friends, family, and customers. And so we're having that. And then we had a new neighbor across, so I'm busy getting that ready. And then we have a new neighbor across the street. And I asked, why don't you guys come on over? My daughter's going to arrive soon and we're going to have a little party for her. And he goes, oh, your daughter's arriving. Is she away at college? So yeah, joy of being an old parent. Should have said University of Vagina. But
the old UVV.
Yeah. Fighting cervix, fighting fallopians. Yeah.
Oh boy.
So it seems like that would have been better. But so he was kind of surprised that he goes, I didn't even know Natalia was pregnant because the wife is here walking around, and she keeps going, and she looks like she just has a really bad thyroid condition or something. All in one spot, like a goiter, abdominal goiter. Yeah, so everything's good. Just it's way too overbearing. And then work, I found myself on all these committees, and then semester end, and a few national efforts that I'm involved in. It's just been a little bit too crazy.
Yeah,
but all good. So that's exciting.
Well, take some time off, man, when your kid comes. For one thing, you're not going to get anything done, and you're not going to get any sleep. I know you don't get that much anyway right now, but yeah. Just to stay home for a few weeks. I'll hold down the fort here. We'll get a guest host. Last week was fun. It was kind of weird talking into my camera for like 30 minutes by myself because my voice got all hoarse and I forgot what it's like to just talk for like 40 minutes at a time. So it was an interesting challenge. So in any case, I'm glad you're back. Glad the family's doing well. And let's jump into our stories. We've got 3 here.
All right.
And the first one, of course, is one that you wrote, Kevin. So this is called Kill the Messenger. mRNA-based livestock vaccines are under attack by skeptics. Here's why their rejectionism is misplaced and dangerous. Next up, does conventional livestock farming use drugs at unnecessarily high levels, endangering human health, as activist groups claim? And finally, 4 multinational companies sell half of all seeds globally, says USDA report on agricultural consolidation. The big ag, Kevin. Oh no. So that's going to be an interesting one. All right, but tell us about this story first. So apparently the COVID vaccines pissed everybody off, and now you can't give these to animals either. What's going on?
Well, this has been a really interesting story and evolving very quickly. And I've found myself being maybe tagged as one of the experts in the subject because I've taken the time to read everything on it and have been just deluged with interviews and phone calls, things like that. What's going on is that long before there was COVID-19, there's been a number of very dangerous animal viruses, highly contagious, move like wildfire through domestic populations, and have significant economic impacts for farmers. And those get passed on to consumers, of course, and many animals get sick. So there really needs to be some sort of solution. Well, a number of companies took on this newly emerging area of mRNA livestock vaccines and coming up with mRNA alternatives to standard vaccination, which is always the protein subunit or attenuated or weakened virus, whatever, the standard way we made vaccines. So the RNA vaccine has actually probably been going in animals research since 2015 in domestic animals. And there's been one that's been on the market for a while, actually 2. But they've been on the market and they've been being used, and they're highly adjustable. You can address new variants. You can address new problems. Very, very agile technology. And this is from Merck. And this is really cool stuff. So Other companies are working in the space. There's a lot going on. Now, enter in COVID-19 and an anti-vaccination movement and an anti-COVID movement who kind of coalesced with anti-vaccines for COVID, and especially didn't like the mRNA. And of course, something new you can always make up horror stories about. Well, you've seen it online. Well, the nanoparticles go to your fallopian tubes, and your mRNA can be detected in your brain months after. All this stuff, and the same sort of uh, anger is now been heading towards animal vaccines when they realize that mRNA vaccines are now being used in animals. And in mostly this is in swine right now. It's all in commercial pigs and none in cattle. Yet the online environment is very upset about being used in cattle. All right, well that's that. That let's just stop there for a second because that's really the setup.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I'm looking through your story and I'm looking at some of these social media posts, and I'm highly confused already. So so it seems to me that the primary concern here, at least according to these people on Facebook and Instagram and so forth, is that this is a backdoor way to vaccinate the population through our food supply. So let's talk about that. They're not especially concerned about the health of the animals in this case. They see this more as Bill Gates and his army of minions are, are trying to
That's right.
sneak COVID shots into everybody through the food. But talk about that if I have
That's right.
assessed that correctly.
No, you got it right. So, and that's what's so cool about this article and Genetic Literacy Project um, is it's got a lot of the social media clips in there that show, how the response to this is happening, and that's what's so ridiculous. Some of them say that, well, they couldn't get it into my arm, so they're going to put it into my hamburger at McDonald's, and they somehow see it shows a complete disconnect between how biology works. They want to use mRNA, which mRNA is an extremely unstable molecule, extremely inherently unstable. You inject this into the animal, into a muscle, it makes an antigen that gives it resistance against a given disease or disorder, a virus or pathogen. And then the RNA goes away, and the protein goes away, and the lipid nanoparticles are long gone. But somehow, folks believe that if you eat the meat from an animal that's been injected with this stuff, that you're going to receive the vaccine, the mRNA hanging around somehow, that moved to an entire animal somehow, even though it's very unstable and breaks down quickly. So this is now a movement that says the mRNA vaccine is still alive and still around and hanging around the cow, and they're never been injected into cows commercially. And so the big problem with this is that now you've got legislators going, well, wait a minute, we can't have this. And without calling Folta, they go ahead and start House Bill 1169 in Missouri that says they're going to they want to label meat products that have received where the cow had received an mRNA vaccine as made with gene therapy. So mRNA vaccines are not gene therapy. They do not make changes to DNA. They do not affect anything like that. Yet they want to label it that way in Missouri if the animal received the mRNA vaccine. So, I mean, this has just got, from the public side, that's crazy, to the politicians getting involved, to the fact that this is great technology that can really help farmers. I mean, this is just an amazing story to me. It just blows me away.
Yeah, so this is strange. So I definitely want to talk about the the benefits for animal welfare and then the economic benefits to agriculture. These are important to talk about, but just fill in the molecular biology for me, Kevin. So messenger RNA isn't a set thing. It's not like, oh, there's one mRNA molecule and it's all the same, right? Right. RNA is the intermediary between DNA and protein, right? And I always get transcription and translation mixed up, but mRNA is there in the middle. So, but it's associated with specific genes, right? It's not like, oh, there's one mRNA vaccine for COVID and for, for PERS and for all this other stuff. So unpack that for me, because that's all tangled up, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So the way that I think about it is DNA is the hard drive of the cell.
Right.
It is to the cell what your hard drive is to the computer. It's the master place of all the information, the blueprint that makes you you. It's tucked away in the nucleus, put away and organized and stored away. And different files are only available. Different information is only accessed at different times, right? It's depends on what program you run, and that's DNA. RNA is a transient form of the information in DNA. So specific parts, specific programs run.
Right.
Different genes are transcribed, as you said,
Okay.
into this temporary form of information called RNA. And the RNA information matches the DNA information to some degree, but it makes essentially a copy of the DNA that in eukaryotic organisms leaves the nucleus and then goes out into the cell. So the DNA stays tucked away in the nucleus in the hard drive. Your USB drive of RNA, its temporary storage of a little bit of information that's on the hard drive, goes out into the nucleus or out into the cytosol from the nucleus. It's a temporary form of information. And while that RNA is moving out to the cytoplasm, the outside of the cell, it's the inside of the cell, but not the nucleus. It is being bombarded by RNases, which are molecules that degrade it, by all kinds of mechanisms and proteins that are binding it. All kinds of things are happening to that RNA. The RNA gets to the ribosome, which is where translation occurs. And translation is where that information that's now in the RNA molecule is translated into a protein. Where don't get them started on tRNA. So tRNA,
Oh, no.
I know there's a bunch of them. The little tRNA comes down with the amino acid. And in a process called translation, they puts them together based upon the information in the RNA. So amino acids get assembled in the right order to make a protein, peptide, and ends up getting folded into the protein that are the functional, catalytic, and structural elements of the cell. So that's the central dogma of molecular biology. When we're giving an mRNA vaccine, we're using the ribosomes of the body and injecting an mRNA into the cell or into the arm that gets into the cytoplasm. And that RNA now is like throwing a USB drive. It's just temporary storage that now gets found by the ribosome and makes the protein. That information is never on the hard drive, never in the nucleus, never on the DNA, only on RNA. So an RNA is horribly unstable. I've worked with RNA my entire career, and you have to keep it on ice. You got to store it at minus 80 C. You have to have solutions impeccably buffered with the right salt and pH, or else the RNA is self-catalytic. There are so many things, not self-catalytic. It's self-hydrolyzes. There's so many things that happen with RNA. It's a very fragile molecule. That's why it's a perfect way to deliver a information to produce an antigen to induce an immune response. I hope that helps.
No, that's great. That's really helpful. And this is the sort of foundational stuff that most people are ignorant of, and that's why I specifically asked that, because even I have a limited understanding. Now I'm not going to go run around on Facebook and go, "Oh, Bill Gates," but that was great. I want to add one thing. This is a comment from Ricky Lewis. She's a geneticist and she's a contributor to GLP, and she left this comment publicly on your article. So I feel entitled to read this. She says, "I'm mRNA free has got to be the dumbest statement I've ever read in my many years as a science writer and geneticist. Seventh graders know that seventh graders know what mRNA is. Without this nucleic acid, an organism or a virus could not exist because it could not transcribe and translate its genes into proteins. Ignorance abounds, stunningly stupid." So I think your explanation was in depth and helpful, and I think she sort of encapsulated the basic essence of the point, which is It's a transient molecule. It's not going to hang around. They haven't tried to. I don't think they have. They haven't tried to sneak a COVID vaccine into I don't even like. I can't even entertain it seriously. It's just such a silly idea. Um, okay, so really quick, Kevin, before we move on to our next story, talk about you did a little bit, but talk about the importance of this to animals because most people don't know when agricultural animals get sick, you can sometimes you can treat them with antibiotics, but in many cases you just have to kill them so they don't infect the rest of the herd, and that's expensive. That costs the farmers money, but it also costs people like me money at the grocery store because it costs more to produce the food. So talk briefly about that if you would.
Yeah, and sometimes when you get a disease like avian influenza, you have to destroy the entire herd,
Yeah.
and it spreads so quickly. So there are remedies for many of these diseases that are either genetic engineering or, in this case, mRNA vaccines. And animal health is tantamount. And when you look at any farmer, if the animal's not well, you're not making money with it, and you also have a sick animal, which we don't want sick animals. We have a place in our heart for them.
Right.
Um, the disease spectrums that's covered, things that they haven't been able to address in other ways. So, porcine reproductive and respiratory virus, PRRS, as you mentioned, has a mRNA vaccine, hoof and mouth disease, rabies, diseases that are transmitted from animal to human, are have vaccines against them. So, avian influenza, there's so many of them in development. It's crazy. And to suggest that this is some sort of problem is totally unacceptable. This is worse than anti-GMO because this is even crazier, and it really stands to harm farmers and harm animals and harm consumer choice. So for me, people got to get on board with this one really quick and start pushing back because there are bills in 3 states right now that seek to limit or label or whatever this technology. So keep abreast of this particular story.
Yeah, do that. I haven't read HB 1169 yet, but I am curious. Do they cite the fact that the FDA regulates gene edited animals as veterinary drugs?
No, they don't even mention that because
That's
that's
really
that's
interesting.
that's way out there. What they're saying is the meat that comes from a injected animal is
Right.
gene therapy, which is not true.
No, no, it's not. But I could see. I don't, maybe that's a
Yeah,
little too sophisticated for these folks.
no, you're right.
Is
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
There's no way it could be gene therapy because if it was gene therapy, it would be impossible to deregulate.
Right.
Almost impossible.
Right. But in other words, I think maybe they could point to that and say, look, the FDA calls these veterinary drugs, so maybe we're not totally out in left field. Anyways, this is just my brain at work. Okay. All right. So conventional livestock related story. Are we just stuffing our animals full of drugs, Kevin?
Well, this goes back to that idea of are you uh, you hear the story all the time that animal agriculture is just pumping animals full of drugs, just like when they say farmers are dousing their fields in chemicals or whatever. And really, what you got to remember is that all of these things cost money, and no one's going to give drugs unnecessarily. In the old days, you could use subtherapeutic levels of certain antibiotics and get a bump and hang out weight of dress out weight of a pig at the end or whatever. But it isn't that doesn't work so much anymore because genetics are so good, they grow so fast. It doesn't matter what if you give them a little extra bump. They're already growing as fast as they can. And so this came from Harriet. The story is by Harriet Bartlett. It was written about an article that was in Scientific Reports. And it's a peer reviewed study that says that um, do different types of animal agriculture have reflect in terms of the yield and how does all of this relate to land use and antibiotic use? And are the more intensive antibiotic uses using more land, and is that really resulting in more production? And they looked at pork mostly because pork is using something like 8.5% of arable land in the world for domestic pork. And the idea here was that they looked at antimicrobial use or antibiotic use. They looked at land use, other different facets, and they looked in different cropping systems, different animal husbandry systems. So and these are a little bit of cryptic terminology to those of us in the U.S., but they have what they call red tractor. They have a couple other ones that, or some that are organic, and these different standards for animal husbandry each have their own boundaries with respect to antibiotic use and land use. And basically, what they found in the article was it really there wasn't any relationship that they could see between the better producers, the higher producers, the ones that use land more efficiently, and more intensive antibiotic use. It just wasn't true. And what you found was that it seemed to be a smattering that across different disciplines, different types of farming, there were high points and low points, and different people used it in different ways. So their punchline was there really wasn't any hard evidence to indicate that more intensive animal agriculture uses more antimicrobials.
So, in other words, the big scandal, the big scare, is more or less non-existent. So here's the summary from the authors. She writes: the results of our study found only weak evidence to support this claim, and importantly, we found several farms which combined high yields and low antibiotic use. Such production systems may provide a guide to meeting a predicted doubling of demand for meat protein by 2050 in the most sustainable way. So that's so interesting, right? Because the argument has been for years from the Soil Association and Friends of the Earth and Earth Worshippers Anonymous, whatever, that, in order to supply this meat that you all can't stop eating, they're just stuffing antibiotics into pigs, into cows. That's not happening. So, I mean, I'm sure you have more thoughtful things to say, Kevin, but as far as I'm concerned, it's,
not really.
it is what it is.
Yeah, it's just a ridiculous claim. I mean, I always thought it was because I know people who are animal producers, and the last thing you want to do is have to treat animals that are unnecessarily, right?
Yeah.
You use it as prescribed, when it's prescribed, when it's necessary. It's a pain to have to vaccinate animals. It's costs a lot of money. You got to have people to do it.
Yeah.
On my space, we do it. I do it, and it sucks. But we do it for different reasons. Day-old chicks get vaccinated against a number of diseases, but there are some. But there are. I almost fell back in mRNA vaccines. It's necessary to treat a sick animal, and that goes without saying. But that goes back to husbandry practices much more than it does anything else. People who have good standard operating procedures on the farm don't get sick animals in the first place. So that's really the big deal.
Yeah. A couple of things that just occurred to me, and I think it's important people know these things, because you don't have an opinion on something if you don't know about it. So all of these drugs are very tightly regulated by the FDA, as Kevin just alluded to. A veterinarian has to prescribe them. And then I don't know who has to administer them. Kevin, maybe it sounds like someone with your background is allowed to administer them, but you can't just go down to Walgreens and be like, hey, give me that antibiotic that's also for human use. I need to make my pigs fatter. It doesn't work that way. And then there's big food producers like Tyson and some of these other companies, and the companies they serve, like I don't know, like I don't know, like these big fast food places, they're all very sensitive to this antibiotic issue because they know people are concerned about it. So in other words, you have the federal regulators, and then you have the biggest industry players that are all paying very careful attention to this. So in other words, there's just a giant disconnect between what's actually happening and what the activist groups are whining about. So yeah, it's another day, I guess. Anyways, yeah. All right. There's no crisis. That's all I got to say, Kevin. So let's talk about multinational companies. Man, it's just a day for bad nonsense myths, huh?
Yeah, this one's an important one, because the reality is we've seen insane consolidation in this area. Back when the 1980s and 90s, I used to ride a bicycle, and I'd ride out in rural areas out in Illinois. And when you rode out by, DeKalb to Caneland, or, down in the Mendota and these areas, I used to ride all these long country roads. you would go by all the different signs for farms. You go by, the different corn that was being trialed. And there were thousands or hundreds of names. And it was really fun to see them. I kind of grooved on them a little bit. I thought they were pretty cool. So I always was looking at the different breeds of corn, different varieties that were being trialed, and different companies that made them. But what you saw from that time to now was intensive consolidation, that these different companies had excellent hybrids and excellent trait development, and they would get bought up by the big companies. So you get bought up by Pioneer, get bought up by DuPont, get bought up by Dow, by BASF, by Monsanto, by Bayer, whatever. And you get bought up by all these, the smaller companies got sucked into the big companies, along with all of their genetics and germplasm. And why this is so important is because we talk about, genetic engineering, GMOs all this time. But it's the foundational plant that really matters, right? Because the foundational plant has all of the traits for yield and for drought tolerance and for everything else. The genetic engineering traits are just resistance to herbicides, resistance to insects, maybe drought in some cases, but in general, the main traits are insect and herbicide resistance. So the foundational corn or whatever, foundational soybeans, foundational genetics have to be superior. And all these companies spent tons of time making that happen. So the article mentions that this report, which was commissioned by the Biden administration, says that that there has been this massive consolidation where I think they said Monsanto bought, was it 600 or 60? I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but a huge number of small companies from the 1990s, 600, I think. And the idea was they bought all of this material. And then the big companies get very good at, so now it's boiled down to, from the big 100 to the big 12 to the big 6 to the big 4. So there's 4 major companies right now, right? You got your Bayer Corteva, which is Dow DuPont, BASF, and the other one, Syngenta ChemChina. And they sell 50% of the world's seed. And so the concern is, okay, you've got 4 companies which have all the IP, they have all the seeds. This looks like a problem from an antitrust, monopoly standpoint. And that's a little bit troubling in a way, because now you've got politicians commissioning USDA studies to see how this might be a problem. And they concluded that it is problematic because smaller companies can't get the genetics out or can't have access to the genetics because of the way they structure patents and things around patented seeds. So let me stop there for a second and hear your thoughts. But I've got a few more really important thoughts on this. It's a troubling article in a lot of ways.
Okay. Yeah. Well, a couple of things to add. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an expert on this or, real frankly, anything we talk about. But I think that there's a tendency to freak out about the size of big companies or big industries, and sometimes that's a problem, as you said. But this is from 2018. This was a study done by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And what they found, because the big concern is, or at least one of the big concerns, is that you have this consolidation in the seed industry, and then prices rise because these companies control everything. So they can charge whatever they want. Farmers are at their whim, and consumers are even, more helpless. But in the study, they found that there's no evidence of higher seed prices in markets with higher levels of market concentration, which is interesting. I'm not quite sure why that would be. You would think, based on everything you hear, that this is a real problem, but that doesn't seem to be the case, or at least it wasn't a few years ago. So that's something I'd like your thoughts on. And then the other thing is that if people are concerned about market domination like this, then you need to reform the regulatory system. You need to make it less expensive and less onerous to get a new seed to market. And this is one of the reasons, we've talked about this too, this is one of the reasons CRISPR and these other gene editing techniques are so important, is because it's easier to use, it's not as costly, you can do things much faster. So this is going to open up the market in that there'll be more competitors to come up against Bayer and these other big companies. So I'll stop there. Those are just 2 things that I've observed on numerous occasions, and lots of people have. But it seems that perhaps the problem is overblown in some circumstances. And also, if you want to address it, you don't need the USDA to come. You don't need a giant monopoly force like the government to come in that's even more powerful than these companies are. You need to fix the regulations and open it up to more competition if you're truly concerned about that. But I'll stop. Go ahead.
No, you're right on though. You could keep going. Especially your second point. The way to do this isn't going to be to take these big companies and break them up into smaller baby bells, right? What you need to do is allow the new technology to come aboard with less regulation. You need to allow the university to compete. You need to have the government compete. You got to have small companies and smaller companies. And I think you are seeing that happening. There's lots of small companies that are doing extremely well because of gene editing and the lower regulatory barrier. And that democratization of the system is fantastic. In a lot of ways, it's similar to what happened with the phone industry, that you had a breakup of the consolidation that was happening and had all these tiny companies that were there. They all ended up being subsumed or blown over for new technology anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when cell phones came around and all the landline companies were sitting there, looking at their phone plugged into the wall, there was no Verizon or T-Mobile. I mean,
Right.
this AT&T, sure, but um, these were the new technology. If you allow it to go and if you allow it to do what it does, will take care of this problem. The problem that is created right now is an onerous regulatory environment that's been created by the companies that they're critical of.
Yeah.
The big companies benefit from making the regulatory system impossible and onerous because they've been through it and they invented it.
Yeah.
And for them, it's a breeze and it keeps out everybody else. They're the only ones who can play in that space. So open it up. And that's where the new technologies are excellent and can really allow us to do it.
That's a fascinating point, actually. And you see it in a lot of industries where you have the critics of the industry and the biggest players in that industry that are aligned on a topic like this. So another classic example is tobacco, right? A lot of the biggest tobacco companies are thrilled with regulations on their industry because they have the lawyers and they have the money to jump all those hurdles, and there's no competitors that can enter the market. And it's the same thing here, right? I think this is funny too because we get called Monsanto shills all the time, but it's very well known that these big firms, they're all too happy to have to submit their products through these review processes for all these federal agencies because nobody else can do it. And one other thing before I stop talking again, I know in the EU that there are a lot of small and mid-sized biotech companies and even universities that have been chomping at the bit to get gene editing deregulated because they've got products ready to go. They've done the R&D. They just can't do anything with it. So it just stays locked up in the laboratory. So all that to say, change the law and then the problem's not going to solve itself. That's the wrong way to put it. But there is a very viable solution on the shelf. And in large part, it's because of our friends like Vandana Shiva and Carrie Gilliam and Gary Reskin and, all these people who supposedly hate big ag who are lobbying to keep all of these rules in place that keep the market locked up. It's hilarious.
Yeah, they enable their most hated companies to survive and do well.
Yeah.
And they keep out the small companies in the EU. And yeah, it's really it's steeped in irony, and it's really unfortunate because we really do need more companies in the space. We need to make this a better uh, uh, technology to be able to reach the people it's intended to serve, and it has to be more agile. And when I see the current administration starting to poke around with USDA surveys on how bad is this climate and this thing, I start to imagine ways in which new regulations are going to come forth. Luckily, I think the way with the makeup of Congress might not right now means we may not have that happen. But down the road, I can very much imagine that this could become a major issue, and we may see the big seed companies broken into pieces and become less effective at what they do. So we shall see.
Yeah, that's another great point I think we should add just before we wrap up here is that these companies, for all of their faults, and they have a lot of them, they're very good at what they do. You know, it's like coming up with a product like glyphosate or some of these seed genetics. These are huge innovations in agriculture, and that's why they're so important. But you need talented scientists, you need good, business people, you need talent that can do these things. So it's not an accident that some of these companies got to where they are. You know, yes, there is the problem of oligopoly, and yes, there are regulatory issues, but you do have there are people at Bayer that are really good at what they do, and that's why the company got to where it was over the last century or however long it's been. But one thing I'll say, GLP has a great frequently asked questions article. It's called "Does Big Ag Dominate Crop Research and the Global Seed Supply Controlling the World Food Market?" It's on their website. Just look it up. It's great. This is where I was pulling all the data from that I was citing. So that'll give you good background. But yeah, good stuff. Thank you as always, Kevin, for giving everyone your agricultural expertise on these different topics.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is a lot of fun. I always appreciate this time to be able to get together and discuss these things, because I think I think that's really what ties together these three stories. We have a public that's been fooled, and legislators and regulators who are ready to legislate and regulate from the position of being fooled. And nothing good can come of that. And I think it's important that these kinds of communications efforts expand and push on, because we have to reach people.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to end up hurting everybody in the long run, and we'll be sitting here saying, how did this happen? Just like what happened with genetic engineering and crops long ago. So
yeah,
good thing. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Well, in 10 years, if you're hungry, come back and listen to these episodes. We told you so. Okay. Well, on that happy note,
that's a great point. I mean, there's next week is the 10-year anniversary of the stunning corn comparison. I don't know if you remember this thing.
No, not by that title anyway.
Yeah, I got to make an article somewhere for this. But basically it was when moms across America made up data and put it out there, and it was amazingly awful. It was data that were made up that were implausible. Like, you couldn't have those data. They were, like, not even close. The corn was full of glyphosate but had 0 carbon. Which, of course, glyphosate is made up of carbon as a backbone. But anyway, long story short, we do need to come back and look at this in 10 years. Put a time capsule on episode 241 or whatever it is. 214.
Yeah, 214. Come back and look at it. And that's great. All right. Well, we're done for the week. Follow us on Twitter at Kevin Folta, at CamJ English. If you want to ask questions or call us stupid or talk about the show, we'd love to interact with you. Genetic Literacy is just at Genetic Literacy on Twitter. As we always say, they put this on for us. So we're very grateful. And with that, we will see you next time for 215.